Welcome to the Deep Dive, the place where we turn massive piles of research and analysis into the sharpest, most surprising insights you can carry straight into your next conversation.
Today, we are tackling a book that is so deeply ingrained in the American imagination. It's almost proverbial. Mark Twain's The Adventures of Tom Sawyer.
And our sources for this are all academic. We're looking at scholarly introductions, biographical deep dives, literary criticism.
Yeah, the kind of material that really forces you to look well past that surface image, the barefoot boy with the whitewashed fence.
Right. So our mission for you, the learner, is to get a really thorough but quick understanding of this novel's dense, complex, and honestly contradictory layers.
We want to get at not just what happened in this fictional town of St. Petersburg, but why. Why this particular story became the defining archetype of American boyhood.
We're going to unpack the satire, the strange structural dualities, and some of the really dark historical anxieties that Twain Samuel L. Clemens was encoding into this seemingly simple tale.
And that's the foundational tension, isn't it? Most people today come to the book through this thick, almost impenetrable lens of nostalgia.
Yeah, it's seen as the classic and perennial vision of boyhood.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But what the sources show is that its success was not immediate. It was far from guaranteed. And a lot of modern criticism, especially when it looks at the darker parts of the book, finds this deeply unsettling nightmare vision.
A nightmare lurking right under that cozy, sunny surface.
So we have to explore how a book that, frankly, struggled commercially at first, became the absolute gold standard for American youth.
Let's start with the man himself. Let's unpack this with Twain's own transformation, what some critics call his ascent.
Okay, so before Tom Sawyer, Samuel Clemens was playing in a very different league, literarily speaking.
He wasn't the esteemed man of letters we think of today.
Not at all. We have to remember his early career was rooted firmly in what was called the impolite genre of humor. He was known for these brief, sharp, sometimes kind of rough and ready sketches.
The kind of thing you'd read in a newspaper, not a library.
Precisely. It was seen as totally distinct from serious capital L literature, which at the time was often very sentimental and dominated by the Eastern establishment. He was a comic writer, a great one, but not yet a great literary writer in their eyes.
But then the sources point to this one moment, a kind of radical self-assessment, an internal pivot that just changed his whole trajectory.
It's an amazing anecdote. It was this lecture he got in 1866 from the diplomat Anson Burlingame.
A lecture in the sense of a scolding, not a speech.
Oh, very much so. Twain had just finished a lecture tour in Hawaii, and apparently after an evening of drinking, Burlingame just lays into him with this incredibly direct life advice.
What did he say?
He basically told him, "You have great ability. I believe you have genius. What you need now is the refinement of association."
Yeah.
He said, "Seek companionship among men of superior intellect and character. Refine yourself in your work.
And then that famous line.
Never affiliate with inferiors. Always climb."
Wow. That is a direct command. Shed the frontier humorist persona, assimilate into the elite.
And he took it to heart immediately. You just look at the timeline. By the early 1870s, right when he's writing Tom Sawyer, Twain has married into the wealthy, genteel northern family of Olivia Langdon.
So this wasn't just a personal choice. This was a career move.
It was a conscious rebranding. He starts styling himself as a serious man of business. He's an investor, an inventor, and, most importantly, an upper-middle-class paterfamilias.
That term, paterfamilias, the male head of the family, that's key, isn't it?
It implies responsibility, propriety, a total move away from the irreverent bachelor life of the West. Tom Sawyer's born right in the middle of this professional and social climb.
Which explains so much about the confusion around the book's initial release. I mean, who was the audience for this thing?
Exactly. How do you market a book written by a humorist who's trying to be a serious man of letters, writing a nostalgic book about a past he himself found kind of humiliating?
It's a mess, marketing-wise.
And the sources show this profound ambiguity in how they tried to sell it. Now remember, he was already famous. He had two huge national fables under his belt.
The Innocence Abroad in '69 and Roughing It in '72.
Right, both big successes. But Tom Sawyer, they pitched it in this strange way, trying to capture two markets at the same time.
You see it in the physical book itself, don't you?
You do. The book was this stately, embossed, often gilded edition. It looked expensive. It was pitched at an affluent, aspirational audience.
The exact audience the new, polished Samuel Clemens wanted to impress.
But, and this is the crucial part, the distribution method was still super populist. It was door-to-door, subscription-based sales.
That subscription model, that often targeted people who were, geographically isolated or less educated, people who wouldn't naturally be shopping in fancy Boston bookstores.
So you've got this elite, expensive-looking product being sold with a grassroots, populist method. It just screams that they were hedging their bets.
And that uncertainty, it translated directly into the sales figures.
They were really underwhelming. The official American Publishing Company edition sold fewer than 24,000 copies in its first year.
And to put that in context, we have to look at his last book.
Right. The Innocence Abroad sold nearly 70,000 copies in its first year. So for Twain, who is now a proven bestseller, Tom Sawyer was, initially at least, a significant commercial flop.
It just didn't land.
No, not with that immediate national recognition he'd come to expect. The book's popularity, its lasting legacy, that was a delayed reaction. It really only took off later.
Faster the sequel.
After the massive critical and commercial success of Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, which came out in 1884. Huck Finn was so big, it made the world turn back and reread the story of Tom.
And that's where you get this fascinating reversal.
Completely. By the time Twain died in 1910, Tom Sawyer had actually outsold all of his other books.
How does that happen?
The sources suggest there was this cultural shift. Tom Sawyer eventually became seen as the safer, easier option, compared to the deep, morally abrasive, and stylistically challenging themes in Huck Finn.
So its perceived safety is what cemented its status as an archetype.
I think so. It's been translated into over 20 languages. It has never been out of print. We internalize its images, even if we haven't read the book.
That whitewashing scene.
The whitewashing scene is universally known. It's proverbial. It defines a very specific kind of cynical truth about human nature.
So the book becomes this fundamental embodiment of boyhood. But as the critics point out, this whole legacy is really complex. Was the book truly this spontaneous voice of youth?
Or is its status just a classic case of nostalgia, of adulthood choosing to look back and construct a certain version of its own past?
It suggests we build these archetypes after the fact to sort of organize our present understanding of who we are.
Precisely. And that's the big question. Are we celebrating the book Twain actually wrote, or are we celebrating the nostalgic myth that society built around it?
Let's move from his life to the text itself, because that internal conflict he was grappling with, the pressure to be genteel versus his instinct for rough humor, it's completely embedded in the language of the novel.
Oh, absolutely. The author is literally split in two right there on the title page.
You've got the name Mark Twain.
Which, we should remember, is a joke. It's the leadsman's call for 2 fathoms of water on the Mississippi, the safety mark. It's the voice of the rough, river-dwelling humorist.
But then right after that, you have the legal propriety of his birth name, Samuel L. Clemens.
Followed by this very hushed, very controlled dedication. To my wife, this book is affectionately dedicated.
That dual branding, it just underscores this drama of the mature professional man trying to organize and govern his own disruptive past.
The book is, in a way, this obsessive exercise in being broken up and reassembled by his own memories. He was drawing so heavily on his childhood in Hannibal, Missouri to create St. Petersburg.
But he had a complicated relationship with memory.
Deeply complicated. He later confessed to hating the past. When someone asked him why, he famously said, "It's so damn humiliating."
Wow. If he found his past humiliating, why go back to it?
I think it suggests the novel is trying to do 2 things at once. It's trying to permit the vitality of that past, the sheer fun and chaos of childhood, but also to control it, to frame it for a polite adult audience.
It's an exploration of how a nation chooses to represent its own infancy.
And this tension, it just explodes in the writing style, which lurches back and forth between what the critics call cliché and critique.
On the one hand, he uses this very prescribed, almost elegant prose.
Right, to give the novel that reassuringly familiar, cozy aspect. He's showing that he knows the rules of good, polite writing. He can play that game.
And we see these very deliberate, elevated descriptions. Characters don't just walk, they wend and sally forth.
A breeze isn't a breeze, it's a zephyr. Big trees become solemn monarchs of the forest.
Dawn is described as great nature's meditation. It sets this almost classical pastoral tone. It's very proper.
But that polite, almost theatrical mask is constantly being ripped off by Twain's acerbic satire. His cynicism. He builds up these sophisticated models and then just unleashes this sharp, authorial judgment that shatters the whole cozy feeling.
The most spectacular example of that, which the sources all highlight, is his takedown of the school compositions.
Oh, it's brutal. He sets up the sentimental prose written by the children and then just demolishes it.
He reproduces these just wonderfully overwrought pieces of writing.
Hmm.
He specifically targets their overuse of words like beauteous.
And he dissects how they refer to human experience as life's page. The narrator provides these witty, sharp reproaches that are totally out of step with the general, tolerant fondness he usually shows for Tom.
It feels almost like a moment of self-loathing. He's projecting it onto the kids' writing. The narrative voice stops being the tolerant adult looking back fondly and becomes this violent critic.
A counterpart to the novel's own aggressively violent schoolmaster, Mr. Dobbins.
Right, he's criticizing the very kind of polite, sentimental writing that he himself sometimes feels forced to adopt to seem respectable.
And this command of literary culture, it extends to his allusions, his literary borrowing. He establishes the author's maturity by referencing the classics.
Like when Tom sees Cardiff Hill as a delectable land.
That's a direct, sophisticated nod to the Delectable Mountains in John Bunyan's The Pilgrim's Progress. He's placing his little childhood tale inside this grand tradition of serious moral literature.
And he also leaned really heavily on, well, on recycling established characters and situations.
He did. The whole domestic dynamic between Tom and Aunt Polly, which feels so unique and warm, is actually described by critics as an extensive borrowing from a character named Mrs. Partington, created by B.P. Shillaber.
Her and her nephew, Ike.
Exactly. It's a fascinating layer of influence. It shows the book is built on tradition, not just pure originality. Both Aunt Polly and Mrs. Partington are presented as these good Calvinist widows.
Whose belief in stern discipline is always betrayed by their soft hearts.
Right. And they both have these mischievous nephews, Tom and Ike, who are experts at working their aunts, feigning sickness to get out of school, sneaking food, writing pirate stories. It's the same dynamic.
The source material even points out that for the first U.S. edition, Twain literally lifted one of the illustrations of Mrs. Partington to serve as Aunt Polly.
Which is just an explicit admission that this is part of a larger, established literary tradition. A tradition that traces all the way back to Sidney Smith's original character, Dame Partington.
So when we're reading Tom Sawyer, we aren't just reading Twain's memory. We're reading a really sophisticated synthesis of literary tropes.
It's the ultimate literary sleight of hand. He makes borrowed material feel deeply personal and uniquely American.
Which brings us to the core of it all. Tom Sawyer himself. He's often presented as the ultimate American boy. And Twain himself wrote in his notebook, "I am not an American, I am the American."
And Tom really seems designed to embody this infant national self. He's endlessly ingenious, always scheming, always after some kind of wealth or glory.
But his actions are almost always driven by expediency, right? Not really by genuine developed principle.
That deep ambivalence is central, that constant back and forth between pride in his own cleverness and these little pangs of shame about his motives.
And yet, for all his adventures, the sources argue that Twain leaves him enclosed within infancy. Tom doesn't really change.
He doesn't. He's as young, vain, and resilient at the very end as he was at the very beginning. There's no conclusive developmental arc. His great moments, the ones he's remembered for, are usually moments of clever trickery.
And no moment better illustrates that principle of profitable expediency than the whitewashing scene.
The mechanism of Tom's inspiration in that scene is key to understanding his particular genius.
It starts with him in total despair. Aunt Polly has given him this monumental task: whitewash 30 yards of board fence 9 feet high.
It's this soul-crushing labor that stretches out before him like a prison sentence.
But his mind starts working. He moves from that despair to what the narrator calls a great, magnificent inspiration.
And that leads to his discovery of the great law of human action.
Which is such a cynical and beautiful law.
It really is. In order to make a man or a boy covet a thing, it is only necessary to make the thing difficult to attain. He just flips the whole scenario on its head. He turns work into an exclusive, desirable privilege.
And this leads the narrator, Twain's philosophical voice, to offer this definitive separation of work versus play.
Yes, work, according to the text, consists of whatever a body is obliged to do. And that play consists of whatever a body is not obliged to do.
So it strips away any inherent value from the activity itself. The value is all about compulsion, or the lack of it.
And he drives the point home with that perfect satirical example of the wealthy English gentleman.
Which is just brilliant.
It is. Twain notes that these rich English gentlemen will pay a considerable amount of money to drive a 4-horse passenger coach for 20 or 30 miles, and they consider it play.
But if you offered them a wage for the exact same
It
service.
would immediately become work, and they would resign in disgust. The obligation destroys the pleasure.
So Tom turns his obligation into play for other people, and he gets rich in the process.
Oh, he becomes a tycoon of boyhood treasures. The sources give this meticulous list of the wealth he amassed from trading the privilege of whitewashing.
What did he get?
He got 12 marbles, part of a Jew's harp, a piece of blue bottle glass to look through, spool cannon, a key that wouldn't unlock anything,
And my favorite item,
and a dead rat and a string to swing it with.
the dead rat. That's where the humorist just breaks right through the philosopher. It grounds this high-minded theory of human action in the low, chaotic, wonderful reality of being a kid.
And this pattern of ingenuity driven by pure vanity, it reappears so spectacularly in the Sunday school scene.
Which is maybe the best illustration of Tom's expedient nature, completely divorced from any actual moral substance.
It all centers on this very complex ticket system, which was designed to reward piety and hard work.
Okay, let's map this out for the listener. So, blue tickets were given for memorizing 2 Bible verses.
10 of those blue tickets got you 1 red ticket.
10 red tickets got you 1 yellow ticket.
And for 10 yellow tickets, the superintendent would reward you with a plainly bound Bible worth about 40 cents.
So it's a system built entirely for performative piety.
Completely. And Tom, who hates Sunday school, who struggles to memorize anything, he could only vaguely recall 5 verses of the Sermon on the Mount, he still desperately desired the glory and the eclat of winning that Bible.
He wants the prize, not the process.
He wants that brilliant display of success, that splash. So his ambition, combined with his newfound wealth from the fens, it drives him straight to deception.
He used his marbles and his Jew's harp and everything else to buy tickets from the other kids, the ones who had actually done the work.
He comes forward and demands a Bible, presenting exactly 9 yellow, 9 red, and 10 blue tickets, enough for the prize.
And it causes a thunderbolt out of a clear sky. Nobody expected Tom Sawyer, the town delinquent, to be a biblical scholar.
The superintendent, Mr. Walters, is just ecstatic. He finally has a local prodigy to show off in front of the visiting bigwig, Judge Thatcher.
But then the judge, very innocently, asked Tom to name the first 2 disciples.
And you get the inevitable, glorious humiliation. Tom, standing there, center stage, flushed with this borrowed glory, just blurts out the only 2 biblical names he can connect.
David and Goliath.
David and Goliath. And then Twain gives us that perfect, cutting authorial aside. Let us draw the curtain of charity over the rest of the scene.
It's the perfect summary of Tom, isn't it? Endlessly ambitious for that eclat, spectacularly ingenious in gaming the system, but completely lacking the substance, the patience, the knowledge required.
And these low-risk formative acts, critics call it trinket morality.
Trinket morality. I like that.
Yeah, it's morality achieved through these small acts that alleviate guilt without requiring any difficult, principled, high-risk action. Like, say, confessing the truth about a murder.
Which sets the stage perfectly for the collision with the book's other half. Because now we have to shift to the grim underbelly of the novel, what the sources and critics like Cynthia Griffin-Wolf call a nightmare vision of American boyhood.
She argues that behind all those pretty picturesque surfaces, St. Petersburg is saturated with violence and critically lacking in any real moral structure.
And the architecture of the town itself tells that story.
It does. If you look at the specific buildings that Twain explicitly features downtown, you find 2 taverns, a courthouse, a jail, and a deserted slaughterhouse.
Which is a devastating list when you think about what's not there.
Exactly. There are no stores mentioned, no blacksmith, no operational bank. It's a landscape defined purely by, consumption, litigation, confinement, and death.
The vital signs of a healthy community are just absent.
And Tom's world is critically devoid of suitable male role models. The only respectable man he interacts with regularly, the schoolteacher Mr. Dobbin, is an open sadist.
And the only man in town who exhibits this unrestrained, defiantly passionate vitality, who acts entirely on his own terms, is the villain, Injun Joe.
That absence of positive, ethical adult guidance, it leaves Tom's ingenuity completely rudderless, unprincipled.
And this grim reality just explodes in the graveyard murder sequence. We really need to recount this in detail because it fundamentally challenges the idea that this is just a cozy, nostalgic book.
The scene unfolds late at night. It's dark, it's heavy. You have 3 men, Muff Potter, Injun Joe, and young Dr. Robinson. And they're there illegally.
Body snatching.
Right, digging up a corpse for the doctor's medical studies. The violence starts over money. Dr. Robinson hits Muff Potter with a headboard from the grave, knocking him out cold,
And in that instant, Injun Joe seizes his chance. He grabs Potter's knife.
and drives it to the hilt in the young man's breast. The brutality is swift, calculated, and absolute.
But the violence is only half the horror.
No, the real horror is what comes next.
Uh-huh.
Injun Joe compounds the crime with this cold, deliberate malice. He robs the doctor's body, and then he commits this meticulous frame-up
He puts the bloody knife in Muff Potter's hand.
in his open right hand while Potter is still unconscious. So Potter, who's drunk and concussed, wakes up, sees the body and the knife, and is easily convinced by Injun Joe's serene, stony-hearted lie that he did it.
So Joe, the actual murderer, convinces the other guy that he is guilty. It's the perfect crime.
Which leaves Tom and Huck completely paralyzed. They witness this calculated evil, and they are convinced that Joe has sold himself to Satan. They swear this binding oath to keep silent.
An oath born not of loyalty, but of pure, paralyzing terror of the murderous half-breed.
And that's the moment the book becomes a thriller, not a comedy.
This scene forces us to address the novel's racial politics and the inherent exclusions of St. Petersburg, Missouri. They're inseparable from the violence.
Absolutely. The sources remind us that the town St. Petersburg is based on, Hannibal, Missouri, was a slave-holding territory.
So the fabled schoolroom, the momentous church scenes Tom navigates, all those scenes of communal life, they would have been exclusively white.
African-American children were excluded from that society. The contrast between Tom's incredible freedom and the historical reality of a place where black people were bought and sold, it's stark.
Twain does try to introduce what the sources call a nostalgic equalizing with the character of Jim, the small colored boy.
Right, you see him at the water pump with white and mulatto children. He gets the same kind of harmless scoldings from Aunt Polly that Tom gets, but the sources caution us that this equality is utterly superficial. It's fleeting.
Because Jim, despite that momentary equality at the pump, is still subject to a white regulatory regime that he will not simply outgrow.
Tom's mischief leads to a brief punishment. Jim's existence within that system is fundamentally precarious, whereas Tom's is just frustrating.
And this complexity is exposed even further in Huck's commentary about his relationship with Uncle Jake.
Yeah, Huck admits he sometimes sleeps in the hayloft, belonging to Ben Rogers' father's nigger man, Uncle Jake. He even eats with him sometimes. It's this intimate, empathetic relationship built on them both being marginalized.
But he talks about it with this profound society-induced shame.
He says, a body's got to do things when he's awful hungry he wouldn't want to do as a steady thing. He's basically saying that associating with Uncle Jake, a black man, is something he only does out of necessity.
It shows how society forces this misplaced external shame onto what is otherwise a respectful, mutually beneficial relationship.
It's a chilling insight. And finally, you can't ignore the text's deliberate association of moral evil with the term half-breed. Injun Joe, the character capable of the greatest malice and calculated violence, is repeatedly defined by that term.
So it's a narrative choice that ties societal exclusion and racial categorization directly to the book's darkest moral center.
The sources are very clear on this. The novel's enduring charm is inseparable from these underlying difficulties. You can't truly appreciate the sunny surface of the whitewashing scene unless you hold the darkness of the graveyard scene in your mind at the same time.
And the psychological cost of witnessing that violence, it leads directly to Tom's struggle with his conscience. It completely disrupts his life.
All his ingenious schemes suddenly feel so trivial when he's confronted with these life and death stakes. The secret tortures him.
He starts talking in his sleep.
Yeah, shouting, it's blood, that's what it is. And his younger half-brother, Sid, overhears him and tries to pry the secret out of him. The terror is just palpable.
And yet, instead of confessing, he resorts to that trinket morality again.
It does. He secretly smuggles small comforts to Muff Potter in jail tobacco, matches, things to ease his confinement. It's a low-risk way to soothe his own conscience. It shows he has compassion, but he is terrified of the consequence of telling the truth about Injun Joe.
But that internal struggle finally breaks. And it breaks in this tremendously dramatic courtroom scene.
Potter's lawyer calls Tom to the stand in this desperate long-shot move. And Tom recounts the whole murder sequence in exhaustive detail. The tension in the room just builds and builds until it gets to the climax and says, Injun Joe jumped with the knife and...
Crash. The text just says crash.
And Injun Joe springs for a window, tears his way through the crowd, and escapes. Tom has done his moral duty, but in doing so, he's condemned himself to perpetual fear.
Right. He's a glittering hero for a moment, celebrated by everyone.
But the resolution is purely psychological. His days are splendor, but his nights are horror. Injun Joe infested all his dreams and always with doom in his eye. He's chronically miserable, convinced Joe will kill him. He won't even go out after dark.
And that lingering terror, the desire to escape his own head, it drives him and Huck back to their romantic fantasies, specifically treasure hunting.
It's a return to fantasy as a form of self-medication. They adopt ideas straight from the most romantic literature they can find. They're dreaming of yellow paper ciphered over hieroglyphics.
And they choose the ultimate symbol of childhood fear as their target, the haunted house on Cardiff Hill.
They're operating on their own established fantasy logic. Ghosts only travel at night using blue lights. So they reason they'll be safe digging during the day.
And that attempt to control the supernatural, to confine evil to the nighttime, is ironically what brings them face to face with real-world evil.
That's where they overhear that shocking conversation. They're hiding upstairs when they hear Injun Joe, brilliantly disguised as a deaf and dumb Spaniard, talking to his accomplice. And they discover this iron-bound chest.
Full of gold, thousands of dollars, possibly belonging to Merle's game.
And Joe reveals his chilling, true motivation. It's not just robbery. He says, "'Tain't robbery altogether, it's revenge."
Revenge against who?
Against the widow Douglas. Her late husband, the former justice of the peace, had been rough on me. But the unforgivable sin was that the judge had him horsewhipped in front of the jail like a nigger, with all the town looking on.
So the violence and racial humiliation he suffered become the explicit driver for his final acts.
But then the boys' own amateur digging, the source of their potential fortune, leads to Joe's crucial mistake.
The fresh earth on the pick.
Exactly. He notices the pick and shovel have fresh earth on it and realizes someone else has been there.
So he decides to move the treasure
to number 2 under the cross, which condemns the boys to more fruitless searching, all while they know Joe is out there, plotting this vengeful attack on the kind widow Douglas.
The action then jumps very quickly to the terrifying cave disaster.
Yeah, Tom and Becky get lost in McGoogle's cave during a picnic. They had explored these new passages, seen a Niagara in stone, a crystal spring. They had a kite line to guide them, but of course it fails.
And the true horror sets in when they realize their last candle is only a half-inch long.
And their only food is this little piece of wedding cake that Becky had saved from the picnic. This tiny piece of sentimental confection becomes their lifeline, which is such a sharp contrast to the immense life-threatening danger they're in.
And that's where Tom has that terrifying close encounter that reintroduces the nightmare.
He's scouting a passage, and he sees the Spaniard Injun Joe holding a candle. Tom is so paralyzed by fear he can't speak, and Joe, not knowing who he is in the dark, just flees further into the cave.
The irony and the tragedy of the climax happen almost at the same time, right after they're rescued.
It's brutal. Judge Thatcher, just so relieved his daughter is safe, he takes these severe measures to prevent any more accidents. He has the main cave door sealed and triple locked with boiler iron.
And Tom hears this news and has this horrific realization: Injun Joe is trapped inside.
The search confirms his fate. He's starved to death. His knife was broken from a useless attempt to hack through the foundation beam of the door.
And the details of his suffering are just haunting.
They are. And they're necessary for that nightmare vision to be complete. He ate bats and candle stubs. And the narrator notes this pathetic cup he'd scooped in the stone floor to catch one single drop of water every 3 minutes.
That detail about the water drop is one of the novel's most profane moments of cosmic irony.
It is. The narrator points out that this drop had been falling with dreadful regularity since the pyramids were new, when Troy fell, when the foundations of Rome were laid.
It fell for thousands of years just to be ready for this flitting human insect's need, and yet it wasn't enough to save him.
Injun Joe's death, as horrifying as it is, brings Tom the security he craved. And, ironically, it secures his fortune.
The boys go right back into the cave.
Through Tom's secret small exit, a passage the narrator calls a whiz, and they find the treasure under the cross, following Joe's footprints and candle grease marks.
And the spoils are immense. They find $12,000 in gold. We should pause on that number because that's not just symbolic wealth in 1840s Missouri, that's transformative.
Oh, absolutely. The sources analyze this. This fortune provides each boy an income of $1 for every weekday and half the Sundays. To put that in perspective, the average minister in a town like that was promised a comparable annual income.
So for 2 boys, this is a staggering amount of instant unearned capital. It makes them the richest citizens in St. Petersburg.
For Tom, this wealth solidifies his standing. It finally grants him that permanent éclat he's been chasing the whole book. But for Huck, the money leads to this profound existential crisis.
Because the wealth drags him directly into civilization. The widow Douglas takes him in, which she sees as saving him.
But he sees it as imprisonment. He's forced to wash, use a knife and fork, wear blamed clothes that smothered him.
And he lasts how long?
He bravely endures this misery for 3 weeks. 3 weeks is all the freedom-loving wild boy can handle. He runs away to an empty hogshead behind the abandoned slaughterhouse.
Back to that symbol of the town's grim reality. He prefers being unkempt and poor.
And Tom finds him there. And this final negotiation they have is really the core philosophical test of the book. Huck confesses he doesn't want to be rich. He doesn't want to live in those cussed, smothery houses.
He misses the woods and the river and being his own master.
And Tom, realizing that his own dreams of starting a robber gang are going to vanish if his best accomplice is a social outcast, is forced to compromise.
And the price of joining the robber gang, the ultimate fantasy of nonconformity, is civilization.
It's the ultimate twist. Tom convinces Huck to go back to the widow for a month, to tackle it and see if I can come to stand it, so that the gang isn't labeled as having low characters in it.
The wild boy has to adopt conformity just so he can pursue the ultimate fantasy of nonconformity.
It shows that Tom, for all his adventures, remains a slave to social conventions and the search for glory, while Huck, the genuine outcast, is forced to abandon his true self just to participate in Tom's fantasy.
So what stands out in this deep dive is the genius of Twain's synthesis. He masterfully combines this realistic social detail, the poverty, the violence, the dark edges, with the wishful truths of a hymn.
That nostalgic song of boyhood we all want to believe in. We accept Tom's journey as universal, not necessarily because it's realistic, but because the book grants us, the adult readers, this authorial maturity to look back tolerantly on that age.
But the sources compel us not to fall in too readily with the author and his version of a rightly constructed past. A past where whistling and digging for treasure and getting rich through trickery are the defining national traits.
The deep dive reveals that the novel's charm is inseparable from its underlying difficulties. Its depiction of racism, deep-seated violence, and moral expediency.
So what does this all mean for you, the learner? This knowledge, it forces you to constantly analyze what parts of the past we choose to accept and universalize, and what parts we choose to neglect.
You're now equipped to distinguish between the realism Twain's masterful literary representation of childhood and the real. The uncomfortable, brutal historical world of 1840s Missouri that St. Petersburg was based on.
The true adventure of reading Tom Sawyer, then, isn't finding the $12,000. It's the necessity of keeping that chilling nightmare vision of Injun Joe, his justified revenge, and the town's pervasive racial exclusions firmly in view.
Only then can you truly appreciate the lightheartedness of the whitewashing scene, because you understand the cost of that innocence. Don't just enjoy the book, read it critically, because that's the only way to appreciate the genius and the complex, often contradictory heart of Mark Twain.